he is flooding the zone. It's been about 2 months. Donald Trump has been in office, and he is flooding the zone. Basically, everybody agrees. On the left and the right, the strategy appears to be do as much as you can, as fast as you can, to overwhelm activists, opposition, and the courts. So there are a lot of things that the Trump administration has done so far for which he has drawn the ire of liberals, Democrats, and the left. And we are going to debate these issues largely from a legal context. And to kick it off, I think one of the biggest stories we've seen in the past couple of weeks has been the deportation or the revocation of visas from students, from activists, protesters, and people with actual legal status in this country. Notably, Trump revoked the legal status of 530,000 immigrants who actually came here legally under a program started by Joe Biden. So we'll talk about that and a whole lot more. We got a couple gentlemen joining us to engage in this debate. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Pisco. I'm an attorney. I do streams on YouTube. Pisco's Hour.
Well, right on. Yeah. And what's your view? You love Trump.
No, I hate Trump. I think that Trump is doing an awful thing to the Constitution. But in this case specifically, I think that there are a lot of conservatives that care about the First Amendment, or at least purport to care about the First Amendment. And there's on-point precedent from the Supreme Court that resident aliens get First Amendment rights. So why is Donald Trump doing the bidding of Israel and attacking the First Amendment rights of, for example, a green card holder who did nothing more than just indicate their view as to the situation in Palestine? It's completely unjustifiable.
Right on, sir. You want to grab that mic and pull it up?
Yeah, sure. Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. I host a YouTube channel and Rumble channel called Good Logic. I'm a New York litigator who turned podcaster after COVID. I'm a massive free speech advocate, so much so that I actually sued Judge Merchan for his unconstitutional gag order of President Trump in pro se, in my own name, because I felt that the violation of his First Amendment right to speak was harming my First Amendment right to cover it as a member of the press. And I took that all the way up and applying to the Supreme Court. But on this particular issue, it's about Mahmoud Khalil, and this is not a First Amendment issue. Sometimes a free speech issue is a First Amendment issue. Often it is, but this is not a situation like that. I look forward to getting into it with you.
Right on. Well, everybody make sure to smash the like button. Share the show if you do want to hear this debate, or if you think people should hear this debate, because it'll get particularly interesting. Not just the immigration issue, but of course there's a whole bunch of other issues, as you already brought up, with the courts and how it affects Trump in this country. But let's just kick it off, man. Tell us what you think. Let me give a little bit of context. So Mahmoud Khalil, he was one of the organizers of the protests we saw in Colombia. He had I believe it was a 2-year conditional green card, which got revoked by the State Department. He is currently pending deportation, but he's not the only one. I think there may be 4 others. These are individuals who are here on legal status with legal visas, who are now having their visas revoked and facing deportation. The Trump administration says that Mahmoud was engaged in activities aligned with Hamas, and that was a national security threat. So there's a lot more to the story, but why don't you tell us?
Yeah, let's first start with what it's not about. It's not about criminal activity. It's not about alleged crimes. I think both of you can agree that we have to take the allegations of the government. We can't invent new rationales for why Mahmoud Khalil is deportable. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't want to hear anything from people in the comments saying he occupied, he helped occupy, or that he's giving material support to Hamas. If the government does not allege that he's giving material support to Hamas, why should we at all assume that he is and invent new rationales for deporting him? And obviously there's no evidence that he's in connection with Hamas or giving any material support to them. So I think that the first point is some agreement that we only discuss the allegations and the actual basis of removability for Mahmoud Khalil.
I want to be clear before we begin this, so we frame our discussion in a healthy way. Whether we're talking about this from a legal perspective or from a moral perspective or philosophical American culture type of perspective, we can attack this as attorneys and talk about whether or not what's happening here and who's in the right and who's in the wrong. Or we can attack this as far as from a moral and philosophical perspective. And I want to make sure that we're both on the same page, so that we don't jump back and forth. That I'll make a point about the law and you'll say philosophically that's wrong. Or I'll make a point about philosophically and you'll come back to the law. So can we pick one? And because I'm sure that Khalil loses on any of those, any way you look at it, philosophically, legally, or as far as American constitutional perspective, like what's a healthy philosophy of our Constitution, he loses every way. So you pick the direction you want to go, and let's go there.
So to be clear, you're not willing to concede the legal argument here.
Which legal argument are you?
This is the First Amendment argument. You're not going to concede it.
That this is a First Amendment argument.
You're not going to concede that Trump is violating the First Amendment by
not even close.
Okay, so let's deal with that first, because I think you would agree that if you thought that the First Amendment was being violated by Trump, you would have to condemn him, wouldn't you?
I would.
Yeah, because the First Amendment's important to you. You just said that you went through all
I went all the way to the Supreme Court.
So let's start there, and I think that would get into some, perhaps some philosophical territory. I'm not willing to shy away from that. I think it's also, a good idea, morally, practically, to have the First Amendment. But let's stick with the First Amendment. Okay. And so I guess my first question for you is, do you think Mahmoud Khalil, a legal permanent resident, let's take the strongest case, do they have First Amendment rights, yes or no?
Quick caveat, he wasn't a permanent resident. He had a conditional 2-year green card.
Sure, but do you want to assume for the purpose of hypothetical that he is a permanent resident?
No, I would.
What is a conditional 2-year green card? Can somebody tell me what that means? You don't know. Quiet down, little bro.
I'm not assuming anything, because you're saying he's acting unconstitutionally to change the nature of as far as what the actual set of facts are.
He has a conditional green card, which basically means you have to reapply for 2 years to get like the 10-year green card visa. But for all intents and purposes, he is an LPR, and he has the government has cleared him to stay in this country. He just needs to go through a couple extra procedures to make sure that it's not a sham marriage, that kind of thing.
Are you willing to concede the fact that he obtained that green card through deceitful and illegal means?
No, I'm not. Not at all. That's a pretext. But why don't we stick to the initial issue, which is, does he even have First Amendment rights?
So I'd say is the First Amendment rights that he enjoys, like any illegal alien, do exist and are not nearly the same level as the rights an American citizen has.
So to be clear, I want to see what you think. You agree that LPRs, lawful permanent residents, even though it's conditional status, I understand that, have First Amendment rights. That is correct, right?
I don't know. I agree that the Supreme Court has said that there is some level of First Amendment rights. But ask yourself this, why? Why do they have any First Amendment rights? Why do we give them civil liberties?
Oh my God. Do you see the movement? Like, he can't just answer the question. Do they have, he's like, well, according to the Supreme Court, they have First Amendment rights. Sure. So you don't agree then? They don't. That's a weasel, by the way, but.
Why has the Supreme Court granted them those liberties, which were created for the protection of American citizens? So why is, and for the benefit of American, right? Because you recognize our government was created by, for, and of the people.
It says we the people.
And the people are citizens, correct?
No, that's not true. The Constitution is clear where it wants to refer to persons and people and where it refers to citizens. For example, in the 14th Amendment, there's a privileges or immunities clause. It speaks about the privileges or immunities of citizens. When it's talking about the
Also, I know he would say he was just not being eloquent in his speech, but it's really funny because I know for a fact that Good Logic would be one of those guys who's like, the government only exists to protect our rights. We don't get rights from the government. The government only exists to protect the rights that we already have. The rights come from our creator, okay? I like how Good Logic is like, the government is literally the thing that gives us our rights, and the government doesn't give any rights to illegal, that's just whatever.
Requirements for who's the president or for who is a senator, it says citizen. When it says, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, or for example, the right of the people to be free from, in their papers, persons, and effects from.
Oh yeah, also notice how he did exactly what he was saying he didn't want to do at the very beginning, which is when he jumped immediately from the law right to the philosophy of like, well, why do these things even exist? Right, that's funny, yeah.
Reasonable searches and seizures. That's referring to persons. And there was a concept of personhood that was broader than citizenship from the attorneys who founded this country and made the Constitution. They were smart people.
So I just want to add, I actually agree. We've had this come up many times on our show. The 4th Amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So what we've highlighted often is that it draws a distinction between persons and citizens, specifically identifying initially all persons born, later on the clarification of what makes someone a citizen. So there's two distinct definitions here. The reason this has come up is actually the pro-life, pro-choice abortion debate in the question of whether or not an unborn child is a person. Interestingly, and I don't mean to be hyperpartisan on this one, but when it comes to the liberal faction, they actually disagree with my assessment on this, arguing that no, it's referring to citizens, and if you're not born, you're not a citizen, because when you get to the question of is the unborn a person, this clearly would protect the life of that person who is not yet a citizen, not yet born.
Yeah, I think that's a cop-out. I think that the courts ultimately will have to determine as a legal matter what is a person, what does that mean
I agree.
For purposes of constitutionality. Now, it could be that the originalist interpretation of person as understood at the time that the Constitution was framed only involved born alive persons. That's not an inconsistent position. Or it could be the case that that the people who founded this country would have considered a person to be someone who is in utero. So I don't pretend to know the actual legal analysis here, but I'm glad, Tim, that you agree that even the First Amendment, let's take a look at the First Amendment, doesn't refer to persons or citizens. It says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
Respecting an establishment, I think.
If we could just look for a moment, at what Tim just read with respect to the 14th Amendment, and the language there is important, and you read it quickly, and I understand why. But there's a distinction there as far as between citizens and persons in that 14th Amendment. And what is promised to persons, those who are not citizens? What's promised them is life, liberty, and due process, not the civil rights in general. So to say that applies, it actually is implicitly against your position. It's actually going to the point that citizens specifically are the ones.
Like, just think about this for a moment. First of all, there's no shot there's any Supreme Court case that would back up this insane and unhinged position. But you're telling me that lawful permanent residents have absolutely no freedom of speech? So like a cop could hear an LPR say, fuck you, and the cop could arrest them, and then they could get convicted of a crime because they have no First Amendment rights? Like, do we have a whole separate body of law just for lawful permanent residents? Like, this is just on its face such an outlandish and absurd statement. Like, what are you talking about?
Ones who have crafted for them our civil liberties, and the only protections that America is willing to afford to those people who are not citizens of this country is life, liberty, and due process.
Well, clearly the Supreme Court disagrees with you. You acknowledge the Supreme Court disagrees with you.
What I'm saying is,
do you acknowledge that, yes or no?
I agree that with we talk about the Wixon case that you're thinking of recognizes that there are some civil liberties that are afforded to people
including
who are not
in that
citizens.
case specifically the First Amendment. Is that right?
So yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're wrong. Yes, the 48 Supreme Court case that we looked at yesterday. I think, he's just.
Just the First Amendment. There's procedural due process cases that aliens have access to. I'm using the term alien here because that's the term used in the.
Because it's the proper term. It's the proper term. That's why.
I don't think it's a nice thing.
Your audience is not offended. Don't
worry. Listen, I want to be accurate here. It says that aliens have access to, for example, you can't just throw them out of the country summarily. There are procedural due process issues, even for
the APA
illegally. Well, not even in absence of the Administrative Procedures Act. There's a constitutional notion of procedural due process that has purchase on persons, and
as said in the 14th Amendment, and they're entitled to due process.
And in the 5th Amendment against the federal government, which is what is at issue here, what you just said and what you acknowledge is, despite what you might think about why the country was formed, the consistent case law has been that persons in this country have access to a lot of civil liberties. I don't know why we wouldn't extend it to the First Amendment if you acknowledge there's case law on point about it. And specifically when the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
Right, and the Supreme Court has recognized, while they recognize the First Amendment right, they also have equally recognized that the First Amendment right of someone who's visiting this country are not as robust as the protections that American citizens have. Do you admit that?
I'm not so sure. For people already admitted into the country. So there's a difference that I acknowledge that the country makes between exclusion matters and for people who are in the country. The key example of this, by the way, are the Chinese exclusion cases. I'm sure that you guys, maybe your audience is not familiar, but there was a point that the first restricted immigration laws in this country, up until 1870 thereabout, we had open borders policy in this country. Complete open borders, except for the Alien Enemies Act and the Alien Friends Act, which maybe we'll get to.
This is actually pretty interesting because it actually functioned this way well after the 1800s. I went to San Diego and was talking with people on both sides of the border. And it's actually, I think in the past, I don't know, what, 50, 60 years, where the border became heavier. And it used to be, even up to like the early 1900s, you could just walk into San Diego back and forth. Only recently, I guess, with national security concerns, communications, and population density, has it become much more rigid.
Yeah, that's totally correct. And the first restrictive immigration laws were against Chinese people. It said, well, the first it was vagrants and stuff, but ultimately it said Chinese people, if you're of Chinese or Asian descent, you can't enter the country. And that case has not been overturned. Right. And you acknowledge that. So I recognize, I hope that you're not.
I'm not sure what your point is as far as that case not being overturned.
So the point,
as if that's still binding law today.
So the point is, I recognize, even though I may disagree, that, and it's interesting, I think that Trump did not argue that it actually was a Muslim ban and seemed to assume that a Muslim ban when he instituted his travel ban would be unconstitutional. So I don't know how viable that precedent is. But in the Chinese exclusion cases, that there is a difference in the law between an exclusion matter and someone who's in the country. So no, I actually don't recognize, and I don't know that to be the case, that individuals in this country, even if they're not permanent residents, don't have First Amendment rights.
Well, you should review Trump v. Hawaii. You should review Reno versus AATC. There have been a myriad of Supreme Court cases which have recognized the fact that those who are visiting this country, not simply when they're abroad, that we're going to give. I don't know what type of free speech limitations you think that they would be. That we're not going to promise free speech to some foreigner who's out in Greenland or well, Greenland soon to be America, but who's out in the UK and say that we recognize that they have a right to speak. That doesn't even mean anything.
So then here's the question:
What free speech? What right to speak? It's that Congress shall pass no laws infringing on a right to speak. And what are we talking about foreigners for? What are you even referring to here? Hello?
If Trump issued an order tomorrow and said, if you're a Jew, your student visa is being revoked.
Right.
Would that be constitutional or not? Yes,
absolutely not.
Why not?
Because the threshold minimum, because, and here's the thing, I've allowed you to engage this conversation in good faith as if this is about First Amendment rights, when this is not at all a First Amendment issue. This is purely an immigration issue. And this is what I was saying with respect to the fact that while I'm a free speech advocate, I don't think that this in any way touches on free speech in the concept of First Amendment rights.
Just as another reminder, conservatives have no values and no principles. They don't believe in freedom of speech. They don't believe in freedom of expression. They don't care about any of that shit. It's as long as they agree with me. As long as they agree with me, then I protect their rights. Otherwise, fuck you. Don't ever think these people, if you call them that, are anything different than that, okay?
And the reason it doesn't is because when you're talking about immigration law, that is where government powers are at their zenith, as opposed to when you're talking about the First Amendment rights of individuals.
I don't even like the terms he's using. Government power? What part of the government are we talking about here? Like the government in its totality? Because Congress has a lot of ability and leeway to pass legislation related to immigration, sure. I think he meant specifically not to talk about immigration, but to talk about national security issues, and not to talk about the government, but explicitly the executive branch or the president. I think that's what he meant to invoke there, but we're pretty wishy-washy with our terms here, I feel, but
First Amendment rights of someone who's merely visiting this country are at their nadir. So what you're trying to postulate here is that this individual whose rights are lower than yours or mine, whose rights are not as robust with respect to his First Amendment rights, is now challenging the decision-making powers of the President of the United States with respect to state and international affairs and national security, which is where the Constitution carves out the strongest powers and protections and says this is the exclusive domain of the executive branch. That is what you're in conflict here and saying this is unconstitutional.
If it's true for free speech, it's true of the religion clauses. The immigration plenary power framework that you've just laid out would apply just as strongly to religion, free speech, which is in the First Amendment, as to the religion clauses that are in the First Amendment.
Here's why he's wrong. If I could just correct that. Now, the reason you're mistaken about that is because the Supreme Court, in its insight, has pointed out that the threshold that you have to meet on an immigration issue is that it has to be facially legitimate and bona fide. Facially legitimate and bona fide. So if you talk about some law that the president will throw out there saying, I don't want any more black people coming into this country, or Muslims or Jews or redheaded Irish people, that is not facially legitimate and bona fide, and it wouldn't pass that.
What if he says Muslims are more likely to do terrorist acts?
And who's the one to determine? Careful. Because who determines if it's facially bona fide or whatever? So are you saying that other people do have the ability to look at what the president is saying? Because that sounds like something that would be reviewable then by a court, right?
If he says Muslims, so that's not. If he says that as Muslims, if he says terrorists, that's
he said Muslims are more likely to commit terrorist acts, and it's facially legitimate.
To me, that's not facial. I don't see how that would be.
Oh, to me, it's not. Oh, okay. Well, far be it from me. Oh my God.
Because to say that everyone who's a member of this religion, which is being practiced by over 1 billion people, is a terror threat, is not facially legitimate and bona fide.
Why is it facially legitimate to say anyone who advocates in support of, even just assume, I do not take it for granted, I just want to be clear, I don't take it as a fact that Mahmoud Khalil supports Hamas. I don't take that as a fact. Let's assume he does. Okay. Why is it facially legitimate to say that what would be, I think you would agree, free speech for citizens, I think you've agreed that LPRs have First Amendment rights. What's the legitimacy in targeting what otherwise would be clearly protected speech?
Just what was LPR?
Lawful permanent resident.
Green card holder.
Right. So the difference, I would definitely agree that all the actions that we know of that Mahmoud Khalil has taken, if it was taken by an American citizen, that the government would be completely out of bounds and wrong for in any way infringing on that. At the same time...
I got to ask you, does the First Amendment pertain to illegal activities?
No.
Sorry.
Well, it defines the scope of what is and what's not legal sometimes. For example, so the First Amendment, if there were a law that said it's illegal to talk to your neighbor, it's illegal to hand out pamphlets in support of Donald Trump, even though there's a law that says it's illegal to do criminality, the Constitution supersedes. And so to the extent that there's an application of law, for example, in the INA that purports to make something illegal, or it would have no purchase if it conflicted with First Amendment precedent.
Did Mahmoud Khalil occupy any buildings illegally?
There's no allegations to that effect, and so why should we consider it? There's no allegation of that. In fact, there's reporting that says that he purposely did not attend any of these sit-ins for the reason of he's worried about the status of his green card.
I could be wrong, but there were conversations and videos, I believe, that showed Mahmoud Khalil inside buildings that had been under quote-unquote student occupation.
At the time they were occupied, or any time?
At the time they were occupied.
Okay, well, listen.
I could be wrong, though.
I read reporting that said that effectively that he was keeping away from those areas, but
For accusations and for court, this is why it's so important to have like a formal process. One might even say due process to evaluate these things, is because media reports and who knows what's true or what's not true, whatever. If it's in front of a judge, though, right? These are formal documents that are submitted that both sides have a right to and the ability to look through and determine, the factuality of them, or to fight against the factuality of them if they want. But this is the issue of not having any kind of due process. Was he there? Was he not? I don't know. Who knows? The government didn't make the charge. There's no court process. There's no due process. We have no idea. We have no way to even arbitrate that that disagreement.
even if it were true, don't you agree that Trump, if he wants to do that, he should charge him with, or he should get someone to charge him with a crime?
Yeah.
Because in this country, there's a line between admissibility basis of removal and deportable basis of removal. And in order to be deportable on the basis of something like, for example, occupying a building, I assume he would need a conviction under that.
No.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now, it would be much worse if Trump had charged him with a crime. If his DOJ went out and charged him with a crime, I would be much more bothered by the action because that would now be because that would be punishing him for his free speech. The Supreme Court has said definitively that deportation and removal is not considered a punishment. I urge you to check. I'll give you the citations: 525 U.S. 471. The case is Reno versus Anti-American Discrimination Committee or Commission. That case spells out very clearly. You cannot pretend, first and foremost, that it is considered criminal punishment, and also that he's held.
I agree. I agree that immigration is not a criminal punishment.
So that's
I totally agree that that's the precedent of the court.
So then ask yourself this: how is it a First Amendment violation at all?
First Amendment does not just arise under criminal actions. For example, if the government said that you can't get a liquor license if you're a Jew, or you can't get a liquor license if you support Trump, I think that you would agree that's not a criminal action, but the First Amendment still has purchase. And yes or no?
And that again is
that a
not
yes?
bona fide.
Wait, is that yes?
You're trying to catch me on a gotcha.
He won't even answer questions. I hate God. It's so bad faith. Just answer. You won't even answer a question. Just answer that question, and then go on to the rest of your answer. He won't even answer it because he's
action, but the First Amendment still has purchase. And yes or no?
And that again is
that
not
a yes?
bona fide.
Wait, is that yes?
You're trying to catch me on a gotcha.
What I'm saying, you just said it was only for criminal matters, and I just want to be clear to the audience: is it only for criminal matters?
What I'm saying is that with respect to someone who's an illegal alien, we are talking about whether or not it's bona fide, it's facially
not an illegal alien
and legitimate.
He's not an illegal
alien. I'm saying is someone who's not an American citizen.
Oh my God. What a fucking slip of the tongue. Oh my God. An illegal alien. I didn't mean illegal. I just meant anyone who's not like an actual citizen. Oh, okay. So it's all the same in your head? Fucking more. What an unbelievable.
Let me ask you guys for clarification, because the Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 221, subsection I, says after the issuance of a visa or other documentation to any alien, the consular officer or the Secretary of State may at any time, in his discretion, revoke such visa or other documentation. There's more to that. There's exceptions. I don't know that I need to read the whole thing. I think you're both familiar with this. So how does this pertain to Mahmoud?
Yeah. So there's wide deference in this country for the Secretary of State, for the Attorney General, for the Department of Homeland Security, for the President himself to make all kinds of decisions that would prejudice his right to be in this country. I don't deny that there's the case law is that there's no substantive right for non-citizens to be in this country. That Congress tomorrow could pass a law that says everyone who's not a citizen needs to leave. You don't have a substantive right to be here. But here's the question. Can you do it for illegitimate purpose that's reprehensible under the Constitution? Using the statute, not saying that the statute itself is unconstitutional facially, but as applied, could you say, for example, in my discretion, because you are a Jew, I am taking away your visa? So the answer is no, right? Well, would you agree?
So far, what I've gotten from what you're saying is that
I'm not going to read over this whole case because I don't have the time. But this fucking guy cited this Reno versus American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee lawsuit. Note the differences. So one, this had to do with 8 resident aliens who were members of the PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which was a terrorist group. I think this might have been one of the organizations that was flying planes into buildings. I think the PFLP was. I think the DFLP is another one. This is what Bad Bunny was wearing I think the headband of. I think it was for the PFLP. This is a terrorist group, okay? And these were 8 resident aliens who were members of that group, okay? And their deportation was ordered. Even though none of the 8 had been accused of committing a criminal act, in response, they filed suit. So they did have the ability, at least initially, to file a lawsuit challenging this, saying that federal officials had targeted them because of their political opinions and political affiliation, a violation of freedoms protected by the First Amendment. But Congress then enacted the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, which eliminated judicial review of the Justice Department's deportation proceedings against several classes of aliens. There are so many other facts that are different here than just the President of the United States has unilaterally decided that he's going to deport some dude with absolutely no review whatsoever and no ability for them to challenge anything. Like,
It sounds like the reason the Trump administration has not accused him of a crime pertaining to those protests and has simply cited national security concerns is to avoid a hearing based on the arguments you're making.
Yeah, that's reprehensible, isn't it?
Well,
No,
I mean,
that's not what happens.
well, but the issue is,
If it's true, would it be reprehensible to we're really doing this for the crime, but we're kind of sneaking it in? Wouldn't that be?
I don't know that they're actually doing it for the crime. I'm saying, if Donald Trump said we don't want people who are not citizens to
Mahmoud Khalil for actual criminal acts, but he's just trying to do it faster through this other method.
well, there's a lot in there. The word punish, for instance. If I don't want to ascribe anything, and what I'm trying to get at is, if Donald Trump were to say we need pretext to remove this man, he's going to find himself in 1A hearings.
Would he find himself an enemy of you, or would you condemn him for coming up with pretext to remove people or to punish people?
But again, just to clarify, because I want to make sure we get the full point before we get into that. The issue appears to be that the Secretary of State has the legal right for any reason in his own discretion at any time to revoke an alien's visa.
Under the law, but as applied, could they violate the Constitution? So I'll ask you, Tim, if he said, in my discretion, I'm going to revoke the visa because he's a Jew, you think that would be illegal?
To revoke someone's visa for...
Pisco is going to know more than me, obviously, on legal shit, but I think the topic that Pisco is centering on has to do with being viewpoint neutral, which makes it not a violation of the First Amendment. So, for instance, I think you could say that the Secretary of State has the right to remove an immigrant for any reason, right? So the Secretary of State could say, hey, I'm revoking your visa because I think you're an asshole. And in that case, I think that the Secretary of State might have the right to do that. But if the Secretary of State said, hey, I'm revoking your visa because you gave a speech about how you wanted to support the Democrats, you wouldn't be allowed to do that because I don't think that's a viewpoint neutral consideration. And if it's not viewpoint neutral, then it's considered a violation of your freedom of speech. I believe is the case.
For being a Jew.
Correct. In the actions of discretion, would you say, for example, well, it says he can revoke it for any reason. Would you say that's legal?
It's a good question. What I would say is...
You can say I don't know.
I do want to address it real quick because my answer is I don't know, because you have two areas. One where the law literally says for any reason, but then you run into the constitutional argument where that law can't be applied as it goes to the First Amendment.
So Tim, doesn't
I don't know.
doesn't the threshold the Supreme Court laid out that for some reason you just want to toss it, you want to just disregard completely when you give a crazy example of let's ban all Jews, let's ban all Muslims, let's ban all redheads, is that facially legitimate and bona fide? You seem to keep just walking, like dancing right past
No,
that.
I'm not. Wait, I acknowledge that the
Your
Chinese
hypotheticals are a joke because of that. So they don't meet that very tiny threshold.
So I want to be very clear. I started that entire conversation by saying the Chinese exclusion laws are still good law. And even though I don't necessarily agree with them. Wait, you think that Chinese exclusion laws are not good law?
What I'm saying is that as of today, you think it's legal today to exclude Chinese?
Immigration lawyers cite that case repeatedly, all the time, with respect to these kind of issues with constitutionality. Che Ching-ping, Fang Wei-ting, these are cases that the Supreme Court is, they constantly are cited there. They have not developed anti-precedent status yet. And I want to, because you accused me of dancing around that issue. I started that conversation by saying, and recognizing the law, which says that by the law, those cases have not been overturned. What I said was, that's an exclusion decision. That's an exclusion decision. That's different than when you're in the interior of the country.
So I have a question for you guys, and I have two questions. The first one's extremely obvious. If a black man walked into a bakery and they said, we don't serve black people, that is illegal.
That's illegal under the the civil rights framework.
Right.
It's private discrimination, different situation.
Right. So in the instance where the individual walks into the store and the owner says, sir, we reserve the right to refuse service to anybody, please leave.
Yeah.
Well, that's not an issue of racism or a violation of the civil rights.
Oh, Tim, nice. Wow. You just stumbled into that. That's correct. That should be fun.
That's a great example, Tim, and I really appreciate it because that goes to show you the extent to which the government actually has latitude in all kinds of. They could have done it through another means. They could have said, we're doing it because this bullshit about the lie, which we can get into on your green card application. They could have found some other means. They could have charged them with a crime with a neutral ground, but they didn't. The reason they didn't, the reason they said it's because you support Hamas, is because they're trying to signal, they're trying to bully private actors, just like they're doing with the universities, just like they're doing with the firms, just like we're doing with all these actors. They're trying to put a signal and say, hey, if you disagree with us on policy on Israel, we're going to make you hurt. And so you're right. If they actually thought he was a security threat, why not go through the other methods of doing so? But they said it specifically, and Rubio's coming out.
So this is about the Jews? That's what it's about?
Listen, you agree. This is about authoritarianism and coercion. Donald Trump doesn't give a fuck about the First Amendment.
Oh my God! You see, this is
he's suing a pollster.
I'm so tired of leftists just coming to these conclusions. As far as I can look inside his head, and I know better than anyone.
I hate him, dude. I can't do this guy. Just as a quick thing. When Good Logic says his case went to the Supreme Court, I'm just curious if he's lying about this. When he says his case went to the Supreme Court, did it go to the United States federal level Supreme Court, or does he just mean the First Court of Appeals in New York State? Does anybody know? I'm actually curious on that. Also, I'm grabbing water. Hold on 1 second. Oh God. In case you didn't know, we said this a million times, but in New York State, their first court of appeals is called the Supreme Court. I don't know why. So I'm curious if does he actually have a case that went to the United States Supreme Court, or is it just like I just want to know. Jesus.
Exactly what Trump is really thinking. Even though I've seen policy after policy that is issued that has had nothing to do whatsoever with reaching the conclusions I've reached, I'm still going to come out here and tell you, I know what he's thinking. He doesn't care about the First Amendment. He doesn't care about due process. He only cares about himself. You can see one piece of evidence after another about this, and you're going to come out there and you're going to say to yourself, oh no, I know better than you. Everyone else. Why? Because I'm sitting here on the outside. Even though I've been tilted and come across him every single way, I'm going to look at any way I possibly can to frame it against him.
There is no other explanation.
Anyway, I'm trying oh my God. So Trump sued a couple of people who did polls he didn't like. So what? Oh my God. So Trump has sued basically every single social media company because they banned him on Facebook. Oh my God. So Donald Trump is writing executive orders targeting lawyers just because they happen to have worked with Mueller in the past. Oh, come on. That's really a First Amendment violation. You really think he's anti-free speech, bro? Okay, so he's trying to sue NBC or whatever because he doesn't like a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala. Okay, well, maybe that wasn't right. Give me a fucking break, dude. Holy shit.
There is no other explanation. If they thought it was because of his criminal conduct, they would say so. If they thought it was, and now they have this bullshit pretext about.
No, what they said was.
Oh, okay. So it did go to the United States Supreme Court at least. All right.
If they thought it was because of his criminal conduct, they would say so. If they thought it was, and now they have this bullshit pretext about.
No, what they said was, let's look at what they did say. What they said was that we consider him a national security issue. What is this proper procedure to do under that issue, under that setting? And the proper procedure is laid out in the APA that I started with, that you wanted to just jump away from. The APA and the steps that they were actually taking was saying we're going to process him through an administrative immigration judge, and he's going to examine this to make sure that we are not just capturing him, throwing a bag over his head, and
like they're doing with the Venezuelans.
Yes,
like they're doing with the Venezuelans.
Yes,
I don't know. Like they're doing with the Venezuelans, not even giving them the opportunity.
Oh my God, he's about to say, I don't know anything about that. He's going to do the thing. He's about to do the thing. Oh, where is that? There's some meme, right, where the guy he's very slowly turning, he's pulling out the. I don't know anything about that, bro. Oh, and you're just absolutely obliterated, dude. Fuck me, man.
File habeas petitions.
What I'm
it's
saying
disgusting. You're defending this regime.
Habeas petitions are not. You're not entitled to a habeas petition the moment you get arrested.
But habeas
petition. You're mistaken. Supreme Court does not allow you to just automatically get a habeas petition. You cannot get it under 1252G, I believe. You cannot go to the federal district court until such time as you've exhausted
the
administrative process.
Notice. They said we didn't even need to send these people that were throwing bags over their heads, going to the tarmac and trying to get them off the plane before the court opens. They said we don't even need to, in court, by the way, in court, they said we don't even need to tell their lawyers where they're at. We don't even need to give them notice of the basis of their removal.
Well, yes, correct. I love Brian, okay? I love Brian Tyler Cohen, okay? But I'm glad that Pisco's like read these. He knows what's happening. Yes, those two things are huge. Because the government said, listen, if you want to challenge your shit in court, go for it. And then the lawyers are saying, okay, the problem is, one, you're literally deporting people without even telling them first, so they don't even know. And two, we don't even know where the fuck they're being held because you won't tell us. How the fuck can you help those people? There's no way to even do anything. Yes.
You're making
the fact that you would defend this criminal regime and say Trump cares about rights is the most preposterous thing I've ever heard.
So let's just come to a conclusion here. So you agree that Mahmoud Khalil, everything's fine. Now you want to move on to the case.
No. I just want to because what I'm telling Tim, I think I saw some nodding there from Tim. I want to see if you agree.
You need to develop a strategy for that shit. What's the fallacy name for that? It's unironically what you need to do is you need to pull a Pisco, and Pisco's not pulling a Pisco. He half pulls a Pisco, and then he goes back to pulling a Destiny, where he tries to make him answer a question, but then he goes off and he doesn't force them to answer the question. He needs to be strong on that. Like, yes or no? Was this true or false? Yes or no? Agree or disagree? Like, he needs to hold him to a point there, because good logic has managed to slippery slide his way like a snake out of every hard answer, basically.
Because you saw
nodding was the Israel stuff.
Well, it seems like that is what he's trying to do. He's trying to signal.
Absolutely.
100%.
So, but I'll clarify too, because you know, one thing that frustrates me is I call them the Jews people, where they think everything's the Jews all the time. I think this is purely related to American foreign policy. I think this country wants to fund its foreign military operations. Israel's a strong ally. The U.S. wants to give them money, wants to be involved, wants military there. I don't think it's the Jews. I think it's a strategic location for U.S. Middle Eastern operations. And you've got these protests that are emerging and influence spreading across universities, which are counter to American foreign policy interests, largely that I disagree with. So I do think Trump is trying to send a message. That's why Romesa, I believe her name was, Ozturk, she had her visa revoked. I believe it was presumably based on a pro-Palestinian paper that was written. Now, that doesn't go to the question of whether or not they have the legal right to do it, but I think the motivation strongly has to do with...
I mean, they're posting the Studio Ghibli of them deporting people. They're posting ASMR.
Well, I'll just real quick...
I don't know, that's a little different because it's not the Israel.
I just want to say, because we talked about this last night, that's a fentanyl dealer. And
I understand, but the whole purpose is to send signals.
I think Trump is trying to trick the left by doing that into defending one of the most...
Well, I'll defend reprehensible people if it means defending our rights. Right now, yeah, I'll absolutely...
But that's the point. You're not defending our rights.
I am defending our rights.
No, it's not our rights.
Yes, it is.
Unless you're here via green card or visa, you're not defending our rights.
What a disgusting subhuman piece of shit. God, I actually hate him. He's so fucking disgusting. God, oh, it's white people. I'm just kidding. It's not. There's racist brown people too. Fuck, it's so gross. These people aren't like us. They're LPRs, bro.
Defending the rights that America decides to confer on people who are not citizens of her nation.
But you just agreed that Mahmoud Khalil has First Amendment rights. You just said
I said they are limited First Amendment rights.
What is the First Amendment? What kind of rights would it be that, okay, you have rights, but you can't say what we want you to say, otherwise we'll throw you out of the country?
Well, let me
say a right.
I have an honest question.
I'll answer it. Can I answer his question?
Yeah.
How is that a right? It's a right in that he's not sitting in a prison. And I don't want him anything.
He's sitting in jail right now.
No, what I'm saying is he's
You fucking, oh my God.
at a detention awaiting for processing.
Cold comfort.
What's cold comfort?
Cold comfort for his wife, who is now 8 months pregnant and didn't even know where he was, and obviously has a kid on the way and is trying to get information from the administration on where he is.
I have a question for you guys. The Constitution applies to non-citizens.
Yes.
The Bill of Rights do. Can they buy guns? Honest question. I don't know if they can.
I think the Second Amendment, as interpreted by this court, I don't necessarily agree.
Do it.
Wait.
Do it.
Wait. Whoa. Listen.
Tell me they can buy guns. That's right. Load them up.
The Second Amendment is based. Listen, and I don't necessarily agree with the court's interpretation as applied in Heller and in the follow-on case McDonald, but that is the precedent of the Supreme Court. And it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's people. And the same logic that would protect non-citizens with respect to searches and seizures, which would protect them for torture, right? You agree that the government can't inflict cruel and unusual punishment to illegal immigrants. You agree with that?
Absolutely.
You agree with that?
So,
do you agree with that, yes or no?
They can't torture illegal.
They can't torture illegal immigrants, right?
I agree with
that. Okay. And
Why? Why? I thought they didn't have any rights.
so you also agree that they can't be subject to unreasonable searches and seizures, right? Fair?
That's due process.
Okay. So why would they not be protected by the Second Amendment?
Yeah. I mean, we've bumped into this one quite a bit because,
Like, Pisco should force an answer there.
I've known for some time that the Constitution applies to all peoples here, and the reason that it does, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, is that if the Fourth Amendment didn't, there'd be no Fourth Amendment. They'd be able to say, we just think you're not a citizen, so now we're going to raid your house.
How is fucking Tim is just by accident bumping into all of the best arguments? Yes. Yeah, that's why, like, without due process, you literally have no rights whatsoever. If due process isn't afforded to you, then you have no right for anything ever, because who the fuck knows, right? Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So no, you can't raid someone's house.
Oh, and he even agreed with it in the background. You hear a good long time? Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Because
You're not a citizen.
Yeah, because the protection is for an individual, not the interpretation of whether they're here legally or not. And so the question then comes to guns, because Second Amendment says the people. So I'm like, can illegal immigrants buy guns in this country?
So
I want everybody-
you're
I
saying
want
when it says the people, that's a limitation that carves out. So you're saying because the Second Amendment says, I never really considered Tim's question before. I think it's an interesting question.
And think about the recent precedent.
I need to explain to you where I'm coming from with respect to this, with respect to illegal aliens. Because
Yes, and now, remember, good logic started this with, let's not mix like law and philosophy or morality, okay? Let's be very specific. And I was like, okay, whoa, fuck the law, okay. Let me just tell you how I personally feel, okay?
I do believe very firmly that our Constitution, when we're first forming our government, our founders have in mind, why do we have a government in the first place? It's in order to help facilitate and secure the safety of our people. But we have this grave concern, and that concern is very obvious based on history, that once you put a government in power, however that government is run, whether it's democracy or something else, that invariably they're going to crush the people. So we're going to set up not a democracy, which we're not at all a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, and that
Oh my God, what?
Constitution will safeguard the individual from the powers that this group of individuals has given the government. And the reason we have this government here is to basically keep those citizens safe from outsiders. So we don't have
Sounds like a liberal justice. Because you
Outsiders, we have a republic, not a democracy. Like, if you were to follow this line of rationalization, okay, you're saying the founding fathers gave us a republic and not a democracy. Why are you saying that? Well, obviously to protect the rights of the people. How does a democracy threaten the rights of the people over a republic? Well, I mean, just think about it. Like in a pure democracy, you could vote people's rights away, and some people might not even have rights. And it's like, okay, so the founding fathers created a constitutional republic instead of a democracy so that large groups of people wouldn't be able to take away the rights of small groups of people. And this was at the same time that slavery was legal, right? Do you understand how fucking retarded this argument is? That this is like the most self-defeating, auto-collapsing argument that has ever been made in the history of all of arguments? Like, what? Holy Christ.
We're saying there's a general purpose for general welfare.
What I'm saying is,
I'm going to interpret these words however I want.
I'm switching into the constitutional theory, not based on like this case here or that statute there. I'm just analyzing now. I asked in the beginning, let's talk about the law. We explored that for 30 minutes. Now,
Oh, yeah, did you?
this point, I'm talking to you as far as constitutional.
We haven't run to ground. We haven't run to ground. I want to know if Tim Pool agrees that this deportation is legitimate, or whether you're going to say you're agnostic about it. I want to know whether you think that this attempted deportation is okay to do or not.
I think it's okay to do.
Why do you think it's okay to do?
I think that this is the next question I was getting into as pertains to the Constitution. The idea that we're going to try and interpret the Constitution, to me, has become largely meaningless outside of the initial 7 articles. The construction of government makes a lot of sense. People often say, they'll say what Trump is doing or what Biden is doing is unconstitutional. They're usually referring to the Bill of Rights, which have never been universally understood ever. For instance,
What?
since blasphemy and obscenity were illegal. Were literally after they ratified the Constitution, you walked outside and screamed obscenities, you'd be arrested, literally arrested. George Carlin was arrested in the 70s for swearing. Like there was no.
There have been bad times in our history where we have not been true to the Constitution.
No, but
John Adams passed the sedition.
Well, wait, hold on. What we have to understand is freedom of speech in the First Amendment doesn't mean that you can't criminalize any type of speech ever. It's more figuring out like, well, what qualifies as speech, which is a difficult question to answer, honestly, right? So, for instance, obscenity is not considered speech, but then there comes a defining question of like, well, what is obscenity, right? And every human being can agree that there are some things that probably should be, that probably shouldn't count as things that should be protected, right? So any adult material aimed at children, explicit like porn, for children is obscenity. There is no free speech protection there. There are certain categories of porn, I believe, that are considered obscene, and there's no free speech protections there. There are certain things that we can all also agree probably should never be protected. If I'm outside and I'm saying like, hey, John, can you go pick up that machete and go hack off Sharon's head? And then John does it, and then you come to arrest me for what? Conspiracy? You mean speech? I can't even talk anymore? What, you're going to ban words, right? Well, that conspiracy crimes are more or less just speech crimes, right? To say that there are certain types of speech that are outlawed, therefore the First Amendment doesn't exist or hasn't been used evenly. Like, there's things that are speech that are protected, and then there are things that we probably don't consider speech. Like, of course, there's going to be a determination here of what qualifies. But this is one of the reasons as well why I get so angry when Americans are like, oh, like we have freedom of speech and Europe doesn't have freedom of speech. It's like, well, hold on, it's a more complicated question than you're aware of.
Sedition Act where it literally was a crime to insult the president. All right.
So, and then it got pulled back.
Correct.
So my point is, as it pertains to the Second Amendment, our current understanding is a complete inversion from every different period throughout various generations of different moral worldviews. Notably with DC versus Heller and then McDonald v. Chicago is when we started to get the actual, you can actually have guns. So it was surprising to me to actually learn this in the past few years because I didn't really pay attention to the gun stuff. But I looked at the map of the right to keep and bear arms pre-Heller didn't exist in this country despite a Second Amendment. You could have a dismantled, broken up piece of guns throughout your house, but it was actually legal for a state to deny you a permit to carry, deny you a permit to own, and require you to dismantle it in your own house.
Initially, the Bill of Rights did not apply to the states. The Bill of Rights were a framework to apply to the federal government. And so that's why there's that proviso. It only affected DC. And so for the longest time, there was no incorporation, is the term called, of the Second Amendment. That's why McDonald's is a case that incorporates it through the due process. But I want to push you a little bit there, because it sounds like what you're suggesting is there's nothing Trump could do, because it's all mushy, it's all woozy, it's all wazzy. There have been times where we disrespected, that there's nothing Trump could do where you would say, I don't like that because of the First Amendment. Is that true?
Let me ask you, is it constitutional to...
Wait, what, could you answer that question first? Well, I asked you, you were kind of like saying, the First Amendment, it's all, we never respected it anyway, who cares about it? That's kind of what, okay, but what would it take that for Trump to do where you would say, okay, because of the First Amendment, this shit is fucked up and I'm going to call him out for on the First Amendment grounds? Is there anything he could do where you would call him out for First Amendment grounds?
So the presupposition there that I have an issue with is First Amendment grounds. I think the real question is moral grounds. I don't care about the Constitution. I care if he's doing something wrong. So
I don't care about the Constitution. If you don't care about, there's something called lame philosophy shit. There's something called the principle of explosion, where in a formalistic sense, what it tries to say is that if you allow a contradiction into some system of logic, then through that contradiction, you can prove any statement to be true. Because through junctions and disjunctions, some bullshit. But like logically, it makes sense, right? If you allow a contradiction to exist, well, if something can be contradicted, why couldn't anything be contradicted? There must be some super system that you're referring to if this system has built-in contradictions. If you don't have any kind of consistent rule of law in this case to apply said principles, then I mean, how are you ever applying them? Now, maybe Tim could say, well, I don't care about the Constitution because I have my own personal moral framework. Okay, but a lot of people have their own personal moral framework. Law is how we distinguish between, or law is how we make commensurate everybody's different moral frameworks by boiling it down to some written thing where we say, okay, well, even if we all disagree or agree on some things morally or whatever, we all agree that these are the things that we have to follow or else the government can deprive us of our rights, right?
Even if the Constitution allows him to be evil, I'm going to call him out for being evil, if it's Trump, Biden, or otherwise.
And if the Constitution says something, for example, it says, for example, if you don't care about the Constitution,
I do care about the Constitution.
But you only care about the non-rights portions of the Constitution?
My point was, the Bill of Rights have been applied by those in whatever way they interpret, and then when it gets challenged to the courts reinterpret or interpret in whatever way they
care about the constitutional rights or not?
Absolutely.
So if you care about the constitutional rights, don't you care?
As I interpret them.
As you interpret them.
And you interpret them differently.
Like when he says things about like, well, courts can interpret and reinterpret and blah, blah, blah. Like they kind of can, but they shouldn't. This is where the concept of stare decisis or stare decisis right? Where stare decisis comes in, where courts aren't really supposed to be in the business of constantly reinterpreting themselves. Gorsuch's opinion that Gorsuch's concurrence and Loper spells out really well. Like this is what stare decisis is supposed to mean. I don't remember all the qualifications of it, but like rulings made during ordinary times, meaning not like, oh my God, like I'm citing this one court case that happened in the middle of World War II. It's like, okay, that was extraordinary time. So it's like a string of rulings made in ordinary times by sober judges. The more you have, like these are supposed to guide you. The collective wisdom of judges over long periods of time are supposed to guide you in how you make your future decisions. This is why the overturning of Roe v. Wade was considered kind of a big deal. He's like, wait, hold on. You're tossing a court case that we've kind of built off of for 60 years. Is a little bit bizarre, right? But these concepts are important because the Constitution is not just constantly reinterpreted every day by a new judge. That's not really true. That's not the case.
I interpret them differently.
But for example, is it cruel and unusual punishment to put a male person in a female prison?
For whom?
How did we get back to? We got back to trans issues already.
Or either.
I think that it could be if you can show, for example,
Could be. We have a problem right now.
Wait,
We don't have a
no,
definitive
listen,
I
understanding.
don't know if Pisco even knows what. I don't know if Pisco knows what Tim Pool is talking about right now. He's talking about the trans person. I don't know if Pisco's aware. Maybe he is.
So it depends because you're going to need to do research on these constitutional principles to see, to what extent is it the danger to the person that you're putting in the female prison. As I understand it, there's not an epidemic of abuse from trans people in
Pisco
male,
does know. That's right.
female
That's
prisons
good.
to female individuals.
He's got
The more
it.
likely situation. Wait. As I understand,
I'm not trying to open that issue for debate. The point of contention was
difficult issue. I don't. But like
exactly. There's an Eighth Amendment, and we actually don't know how to apply it to certain issues.
But here we have something clear, right? Here we have something clear. You think if an American citizen did what Mahmoud Khalil did, do you think that he should be able to go to jail under the First Amendment?
Absolutely not.
If he was occupying a building, yes.
No,
That's not. He didn't get charged with. Sorry.
that aside, because we have to put that aside, because the government's not alleging that, right? So
Yes.
if all that's being alleged is an American
He leafleted for Al-Aqsa flood.
Okay, but
That's
so
what- that- that's
an
the
American
first
citizen
thing.
can do that, right?
Indeed.
And if Trump threw an American citizen in jail or said that you can't get liquor license because you did that, something that's perfectly constitutional, would you call him out for First Amendment violation?
Yes.
So the only difference here is whether or not he's a resident alien or whether he's American. That's really the only difference.
Absolutely.
And so you just agreed, didn't you, that resident aliens have First Amendment rights?
No.
And as he pointed out, they're limited, and that's why I asked the question about guns and cruel and unusual
You
punishment.
agreed in the guns context.
First Amendment is not the guns amendment, but it's okay.
You said, of course it's natural that you have gun rights. And so it seems like you're granted in the guns right. In fact, that's a hot take, and it's one that I respect you for. But why wouldn't you grant it in the First Amendment context?
Like I already mentioned, we could not sit here and define what cruel and unusual punishment is as per the Eighth Amendment. So you're going to assert there are certain. So the argument really just boils down to my moral worldview. That's the issue I take with the Bill of Rights and how we interpret them. As you guys are all citing legal precedent, saying the court said this and the court said that, I'm sitting here being like, the only thing that really matters is whether the majority body politic determines it to be moral or not. So, for instance, when it was a predominantly Christian nation, if you
I would. This gets into like legal philosophy or whatever, which I'm not really qualified to give an opinion on. But I would argue that to some extent, judges protect you from just this like mass fucking popular opinion of what's legal or what's not legal. I would argue that judges should be there to some extent to protect you from that. I would hope. They're not just there to follow the mass body politic or whatever.
blasphemed, you'd find yourself in jail. If you went in public and started cussing and swearing, you'd find yourself in jail. But as we've shifted away from that moral worldview, you can now go on television and cuss up a storm like South Park did, counting how many times they swore on TV. These things change dramatically. Right now, as a society, we don't know. You've got the conservatives saying, and I use this because it's obviously a hot button issue. A judge just ruled that Trump must return two biological male individuals to a woman's prison. Women there are upset. And liberal activists say putting transgender individuals who are undergoing, who are affirmed, HRT, in a male prison is cruel and unusual to them. Conservatives argue the inverse. There's not going to be an accepted moral worldview between the two political factions in this country on that issue.
But I just want to take an issue with the premise there, because you said what ultimately is going to be protected by these rights is going to be determined by the body politic. I think that's crucially misunderstanding the purpose of the rights. These rights are meant to apply as to the majority.
I know.
The reason that they're so difficult to get rid of is because it's supposed to be protection against the excesses of a majority. And there's some ANCAPs.
Yes. Thank you. Oh, God. Fuck. I haven't heard anybody with like a thorough understanding, a good argumentation. Yes. Because think about what Tim is saying. If the whole point of the courts was just to go along with what all the people thought, we wouldn't need courts, right? We don't need courts. We would just lynch people, which is what Tim Pool is essentially saying is happening, that judges just make rulings based on what all the people, think already. Well, then we don't need courts at that point. We just lynch people. Like, this is essentially what you're describing, right? Yes.
Or anarcho-style people here that I met who are like really nice people, and they understand this, right? And if you're an anarcho-capitalist, you understand this, that there are abuses that the majority of the public can do,
Yes.
and the rights are to stand in contradiction to what general sentiment
Correct.
is, and to say, no, even if Congress wants to, right? Congress shall make no law. So even if Congress would like to violate the First Amendment rights
Yep.
of Mahmoud Khalil, they can't. That's what the First Amendment has to protect. And they
Over and over again, they violated every.
Don't we have
Oh, my God. Tim's like...
have a requirement, just like in the Second Amendment context, and you think the Second Amendment is important. Wasn't it important for the Supreme Court to say, in your view, that
like a good question would be here, because it would appeal to Tim's mind too, is the concept of moral progress, right? Are the laws that we have today for America better than the laws that we had 250 years ago or whatever, right? Yeah, it's gotten better, right? Have there been violations? Have there been abuses? Have there been excesses? Sure, but in general, ideally, we've worked within the framework of this Constitution to ensure more rights, more protections, everything else for Americans in general over time, right? Would you agree with that?
there is an individual right here associated with gun.
What does infringe mean?
Infringe?
Yeah.
It's going to be different.
The right to keep and bear arms has been infringed every possible way, and we're supposed to sit here and say we have a Second Amendment. We don't. The First Amendment, they've made. How many laws are on the books pertaining to speech, religion, or otherwise? There's a ridiculous amount of them.
But is that just an excuse not to ever think about the First Amendment?
No. It's a moral, philosophical point that this country tolerates what violates the Constitution if it applies to the majority, and that's not correct.
There are clear cases and there are unclear cases, right? There's a clear case of Second Amendment violation that says no, every gun ownership, that's a crime. You would say that's a clear case that reasonable minds can't disagree about. Or
you're arguing extremes instead of what we're actually.
No, but what I'm saying, but your framework where you're saying, well, who knows because the Congress is always violated. That's an excuse to never apply the principle, even in clear cases.
Yes.
And here we have a clear case where you acknowledge that the First Amendment, as to citizens, would protect this conduct. And in fact, you would criticize Trump if he went after citizens for doing this conduct. You've also accepted, I think, as a maxim or as a general principle, that resident aliens do have First Amendment rights.
Now,
so why does that not follow? Why doesn't it?
I mean, I'd like to have.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
Well, let me make one more point on this.
Yeah.
The reason I asked the question about a black man going into a bakery, the baker could say to him, I'm sorry, look, we reserve the right to refuse service to anybody. Goodbye. And what can you really do? Often in these circumstances, individuals who feel aggrieved will sue anyway, and they'll often win. Even if it actually isn't.
Whether they win or not, but that's going to depend on like a totality of circumstances. I don't know. I don't think I'm using it. I shouldn't say totality of circumstances. I don't know if I'm using it correctly. But like, I think you can demonstrate discriminatory behavior by bringing in more examples and more circumstances as well, right? Like if you show that like, oh, hey, look, this guy's used the same excuse for every single black customer, then you can try to show that in a court case, right?
Isn't the case that the person was discriminated against based on race. The issue then becomes to be racist, simply just don't admit you are. So what we have here is the INA allows them to deport Mahmoud Khalil. And so I shrug and say, change the law if you have an issue with it. But for the time being, there's nothing else to be done.
So if they said national security threat because he's a Muslim, we're deporting him, would you say the same thing?
That's the point I made about the bakery.
So would you say
No.
that? Why wouldn't you?
So this is the problem with the law as it is written. I completely think it is scripted, makes no sense. It results in people who are not racist being accused of racist, and racists actually getting away with things they're not supposed to be able to get away with.
Like if you want to talk philosophy, like because I don't think philosophy is bad, by the way, or legal philosophy is bad. But in fact, here I think it would actually be really good to speak on the well, hold on. Mahmoud Khalil wasn't deported based on the Alien Exclusion Act. Wait, I keep mixing these up. It's the Alien Exclusion Act, right? I'm never going to remember this. No, the Alien Enemies Act. Fuck! Okay, he was deported based on the under the provisions of having a green card or whatever that make it so that you can deport somebody providing material support for terrorists or whatever, right? I think that this is where a little bit of foreign politics or foreign policy understanding, I think, comes in. That I've stressed this a few times, and it's largely ignored, I guess, in domestic conversations. But that the world has changed in that terrorist groups now are sometimes state actors. I've brought this up as a challenge domestically in the United States. So, for instance, when we say don't support terrorists, ordinarily that's a pretty non-objectionable statement. But when terrorists are now governments, well, now we get into a really weird world. In the United States of America, I believe, and everyone in my audience should believe, you have the right to support the North Korean government. You have the right to support Iran, whatever. Like these governments are, if I think they're abhorrent or whatever, but you have the right to support them, just like we have the right to protest against Vietnam. However, it can be a little bit hairier when you're talking about supporting, especially providing material support to individual terrorist groups or taking direction from individual terrorist groups. Like it gets weirder there. But when terrorist groups have now become governments of people, like Hamas has, this provides a lot of unique challenges both for international law and, in my opinion, for domestic law here. Because the question is, right, following this train of thought, if you were an immigrant of any kind in the United States, a lawful permanent resident, would you ever feel comfortable now protesting in support of the Palestinian people? I wouldn't. I would be terrified. Imagine you're at a rally for the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and a few people there, you don't even realize it, but some people there have like pro-Hamas signs. Are you now subject to deportation under these immigration rules? I think the answer should be obviously no. That's not in the spirit of how that law was written, right? Destiny, I think the issue is that support is too broad. I actually don't agree that it's too broad. I want to say in the law, I think support is actually defined as material support. The public conversation we have is just that, oh, well, support just means you support them. But I don't think in the law that's how it's defined. We're just all saying that. Somebody can link it or read through it if they want, but yeah.
Wait, so this is New York City has human rights law that protects 31 identifiable genders. It defines in their human rights code, gender identity is self-expression. Mm-hmm. So I called a human rights lawyer, 3 of them actually, in New York, And I said, I'm trying to get an understanding of how this law would actually be applied. It says that the clothing you wear, the name you call yourself, you cannot be discriminated against in public accommodation based on these characteristics. They all agreed, yes. I had the law in front of me. I said, so if there is a clearly identifiable biological male wearing a dress with lipstick on who calls himself Susan and says he's a her, they cannot discriminate. This person gets hired for a job. They're allowed to wear female clothing. Absolutely. I said, okay, what if someone dresses up in a fursuit, a furry, and they refer to themselves as Vociferon, Herald of the Winter Mists? I'm intentionally making it
Absurd. Yeah.
They all said the courts would laugh that out of the courtroom. You'd never get through. They would fire you in 2 seconds. I said, why is a judge allowed to laugh at an individual's identity that the law supposedly protects? And they said, because the judges can interpret as they see fit. And I said, then there may as well be no law at all.
I know, but that's the conclusion there. That can't be right? Because you're saying is then judges can't interpret the provision of the INA.
Laugh at a transfer.
Okay, but then you're not stating your position. You're just stating basically it's a real fact that judges are going to do what judges are going to do. Indeed,
my position is this will go to a hearing, and the INA gives.
The problem is that Tim is doing the continuum fallacy as expressed by the Loki's wager story, right? Where Loki gets captured, or not captured, I think it's Loki's wager. He makes a bet with a couple of dwarves, and he loses the bet, and what he'd bet was his head. And the dwarves go to take his head, and Loki says, you can have my head, because that's what we bet, but you can't take an inch of my neck. And so they bend him over, they have the axe ready, and they're trying to figure out, like, well, where does his head stop and the neck begin? And they can't determine like exactly that point. So then Loki walks, okay, like the trickster he is. I don't know why this applies to Loki. Isn't there like a trickier god to talk about? This is like a parable expression of the continuum fallacy. Just because it's hard to tell when one thing becomes another thing doesn't mean that these two things aren't separate and distinct. And it doesn't mean that we would say they don't exist at all. For instance, we all agree that a grain of sand exists. We all agree that a pile of sand exists. We wouldn't call 5 grains of sand a pile of sand. We wouldn't be able to say exactly when a certain amount of grains become a pile of sand, but we do agree that these are two distinct things. Just because some judges might disagree on the edge cases doesn't mean we can throw all of it out. That's just not true. That's not how any human thinks about anything.
The Secretary of State the right to deport, and I don't see any reason why they can't do that.
Okay, so but my question.
Loki is the trickster god? Oh, in my mind, Loki just shoots lightning at people, but maybe that's... Wait, I'm thinking of Thor. Wait, who is Loki? Why do I think of Loki as lightning? Maybe just because it sounds like... Oh, no, he is the tricky guy. Never mind, just kidding. Makes sense then.
This will go to a hearing, and the INA gives Secretary of State the right to deport, and I don't see any reason why they can't do that.
Okay, so but my question for you, which you dodged, and I'm going to ask it again, is if Trump said we're deporting him because he's a Muslim, you would say
yes.
Wait, so you would not condemn Trump for that?
No. You asked me if...
Would you condemn him for it?
Let me slow down.
Yeah.
You asked me if Donald Trump said we're deporting him for being a Muslim, would you object to
condemn
it?
it?
I said yes.
Okay, why would
did I literally say
okay,
yes?
so why would you not condemn him? So the First Amendment says...
Because he's not saying it's because he's a Muslim.
No, I understand that, but this is why. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Presumably, you would condemn him for violating the First...
Somebody says they define support as material support here, any property, tangible or intangible, or service, including currency or monetary instruments or financial securities, financial services, lodging, training, expert advice or assistance, safe houses, false documentation or identification, communications equipment. Yeah, okay. Which makes sense. We probably wouldn't want somebody in the United States providing these types of services to Al-Qaeda, right?
First Amendment for violating the religion clauses of the Constitution.
87 years ago, I actually, I thought of that. Why didn't the dwarves reverse trick Loki and say, okay, you're right, we can't figure out, we're not going to take any of your neck, we're just going to chop half your head off. Yeah, and then call it even.
No law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Presumably, you would condemn him for violating the First Amendment for violating the religion clauses of the Constitution.
I think distributing material directly made to garner support for Hamas, which was made by Hamas, should be added to material support. If you could prove that the material came directly from Hamas and then was given to them for distribution, and that the person knew that at the time they received it and distributed it, then maybe.
Establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Presumably, you would condemn him for violating the First Amendment for violating the religion clauses of the Constitution, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And the First Amendment also says, do not abridge the freedom of speech, Congress. So by the same provision, the INA that you cited says he gives the right to do it, you would condemn Trump if he cited that provision, and in part of his rationale he said, well, because he's Muslim, but if another part of the First Amendment is invoked as a rationale, now it's different. And now you're not applying that.
And my position is, and has been on the Mahmoud Khalil case, is that claiming he's aligned with Hamas is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's ridiculous. However, the INA says they can deport non-citizens.
But it also says that if they were to put up a rationale of Muslim. But you would,
like the rationale matters. The argument that you use here matters, right? If a police officer sees you punch somebody in the face and then you run down the street and the police officer runs and arrests you, and the police officer says, get over here, darky, I'm arresting you because you're black, and they arrest you, that'll get tossed. You have to cite and this might be a bad example because technically a police officer doesn't have to tell you the probable cause or whatever, but like if somebody's engaged in a manner and they're citing something, or they say to a judge, you know, when they do the PC evaluation or whatever, like, you know, what was the probable cause, but how did you do this? And the guy says, oh, he was black, I figure, you know, then it'll get tossed. Even if he was doing something bad, even if you saw him do something bad, the citation that you give is important. This is one of the reasons why DACA survived Trump trying to get rid of it, is because the rationale that Trump gave was dog shit, or in a legal term, arbitrary and capricious. There was no good reason given for why he was trying to rescind this law, and it would cause a whole bunch of headache for the federal government, so fuck off. You can't just give random fuck reasons. It'll get tossed, as it should, right?
We'll condemn one and not the other.
No, I literally condemned both. I said claiming that he's aligned with Hamas is stupid and wrong. But
he's being deported because he. Sorry. So if Trump actually initiated deporting proceedings, so what I understand is you have not condemned this deportation proceeding. You haven't, but you would condemn a hypothetical deportation proceeding because he's a Muslim.
No, slow down. They can deport anybody they want.
On any basis. And
it literally says that in the INA.
And you wouldn't condemn it. On any basis, and you wouldn't condemn it.
On any basis, a little bit too absolute.
Stale, I see you in chat. There are still negative comments on me that show up on LSUp sometimes. I don't know if the $1,000 a week that I send you is not enough. I'm tapping my Mossad contacts to get a little bit more, but I need you to do something about these, okay?
I'm sure there's some rationale where I'm going to be like, a guy discovered that Trump punched a baby, so they deported him quickly. I'd be like, whoa.
So would you condemn a deportation?
What if we did the same for information disseminated from Russia? As an American citizen, you have a right to do any of that. You're totally fine. You're totally within your rights to do that. Now, the only difference is if it's coming from a foreign actor, you just have to declare it, right? So that it's not a... you have to be a foreign registered agent to do it, right?
Some rationale where I'm going to be like, a guy discovered that Trump punched a baby.
Debating Tim is beyond waste of time. Nor him nor his audience actually care. I don't know if Tim is gearing up to fucking do a turnabout or whatever, because I don't even know why. But I would say in this conversation, I think Tim has actually been pretty like libertarian. Like he's just kind of adhering to libertarian principles here, like which is much better than ordinarily he's just like a Trump shill. So I think Tim's done. I think his contribution to the conversation. There's stuff I disagree with, but it seems like you just follow on like libertarian lines rather than like the strict Trump dick suck lines, which I appreciate. So
they can deport anybody they want.
On any basis. And
it literally says that in the INA.
And you wouldn't condemn it. On any basis, and you wouldn't condemn it.
On any basis, a little bit too absolute. I'm sure there's some rationale where I'm going to be like, a guy discovered that Trump punched a baby, so they deported him quickly. I'd be like, whoa.
So would you condemn a deportation proceeding that was based on religion, even notwithstanding the fact that you wouldn't condemn that?
I would. I'm trying to explain. Slow down. If he said, I don't want a Muslim, get him out of here. I'd say, whoa,
black. Get him out.
Yeah, whoa, what do you think? Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. That's a stupid. You can't do that. That's not a real reason. That's the rationale. And then we go to the INA and I say, oh, Congress passed a law saying they can deport anybody they want for any reason at any time.
They haven't done that. I don't agree with your reading of the INA, but I just want to be. I'm assuming.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It says at his own discretion.
It says every alien. Oh, so this is you're looking at section 222.
221. Subsection I.
So after the issuance of a visa or other documentation to any alien, the consular officer or the Secretary of State may at any time in his discretion revoke such visa or other documentation. Notice of such ratification shall be communicated to the Attorney General, and such ratification shall invalidate.
Screw it, he never reads his chat unless you say that or ask if he reads the YouTube chat. Please constantly cut. JK, have a good day. Fuck you. I would ban you if I knew how to.
The visa or other document from the date of issuance, provided that carriers or transportation companies. Okay, so all that other stuff. So
the other stuff is related to like
go upwards. Does this apply to LPRs?
Yes.
Yes. Go upwards.
Yes.
This is.
But even so, go up to the top of the section.
Here's where you have a problem, Pisco.
Yeah, what's the problem?
It's that he's held the same way that he can be denied a visa. They're held, and the Supreme Court says you can hold him to the same standard with respect to maintaining that visa or green card. You cannot lie on it. You cannot say on a forum, I'm not going to do this, and then if it turns out that they change the status, or in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, where they actually lie on their application for one reason or another. I don't know if that lie was because they were afraid of further.
That's not why they got rid of him, though. If he lied on his application and they wanted to go after him for lying on his application. Do you understand what I say? Like, the process matters. You understand this, right? Like, the process matters. If that's what you want to go after somebody for, then go after them for that. You can't just cite some random reason and then try to find some reason afterwards.
Investigations, which would clearly throw them out. We don't know what the issue is. But at the end of the day, you're held to the same standard while you're residing here until such time as you are fully naturalized. Once someone is naturalized, and I believe this in my heart of hearts to be both constitutionally correct, morally correct, and legally correct.
Bullshit. It's absolute fucking bullshit that these guys who fucking, wrap themselves in the First Amendment so much are all of a sudden okay with so many more restrictions on speech. Like, it's such bullshit. Embarrassing.
Once someone is fully naturalized and becomes an American citizen, that blessing of that work to attain that is conferred upon them, the very special status that America affords her own citizens. And that status does not get afforded simply because they filled out a form and managed to get a visa. visa.
He didn't just have a visa, he had a green card. Going from green card to citizen is relatively easy. Getting the green card is the hard part, okay? Like, my understanding, I'm pretty sure for me and Melina, that took like, now because of COVID as well, that was like 3 or 4 fucking years to get that fucking green card. Citizenship status is basically like, don't do some insane shit and then stay in the country for, because it was a marriage one, it might have been provisional, but like 2 to 5 years, and then you reapply for either green card, and then you do your citizenship thing. Like, the green card is the hard part. The citizenship is relatively easy once you have the green card.
A green card.
Joe, I like you.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I like you. What Tim just said was fucking crazy. I need you to acknowledge that.
I don't know what he said.
What Tim just said is that legally, the Secretary of State or any member of the administration, I'll even assume the law says what it says and it applies to green cards. For any reason, they can deport any alien.
I think the threshold is literally what a threshold I've said now 4 times, which is facially legitimate and bona fide.
He said he would not condemn a deportation.
That's his moral. That's his morality.
What's crazy about me saying America's for American citizens?
What about for, no, I'm not saying that is crazy for you to say America's for American citizens, but I think that what America is defined largely by the Constitution, right? America is not just a geographical space, right? It's also, this pronouncement says, we the people of the United States are enacting, right? We are actually doing something here with the...
I never expected, also, I am glad that I felt this way for a long time, that libertarians are just fucking conservatives in disguise, or have been at least for over a decade now. I blame the Tea Party, actually, for doing that, because the Tea Party hijacked the concept of libertarian and just basically made them all Republicans. The instantaneous retreat from any principled attachment to things like freedom of speech has been, I'll say, shocking, to say the least. Jesus.
The Constitution. And America is defined by its Constitution. So for you to say something like Americans for American citizens, well, part of what America is the First Amendment. And so I respect what America...
Also, I'm sorry, fuck that comment from my subreddit. These people will defend gallows. I think that this should be the most scary thing, because it shows you, it is demonstrating that Trump supporters will support basically anything. That you can go to the outer perimeter of insane shit now that people used to say about Republicans, 7 or 8 years ago, and now it seems to be the case that it's probably true that a conservative will defend almost anything that this administration does. And that's just being demonstrated time and time and time and time and time again. The invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, the signal group chat leak shit, just everything will be defended. Anything and everything will be defended by the current conservative voter base. It's just...
is in its highest ideals, and that would be, even if I think that America in principle should cater to citizens more, if America does something that violates its principles, like discriminating on the basis of religion,
why would you?
I would call it out.
I actually think when you map the political conflict we've had over the last 15 years, you come...
You think that maggots will actually defend with the Second Amendment or let Trump take it away? MAGA would let Trump take away the Second Amendment. They would. And my evidence for that is, I hadn't even seen this. Was this 5 years ago or was this 1 year ago? He was talking to Pam Bondi. I was shocked. If Kamala or Biden had made any statements about it was Pam talking to Trump about being able to take away guns from people for, I think it basically sounded like red flag laws, something like that. And Trump was fully on board for it.
Yesterday,
and it was like...
comes to protecting gun rights. This decision is...
They were both sitting at a table. It almost looked like, it was like a big brown table. Does anybody have any idea what conversation I'm referring to?
Okay, Pam Bondi. What do I think? I'm getting this more...
It was, I think it might have been this.
Both sides of the aisle.
Maybe?
I think that has made a significant difference in...
I think Pam was basically talking about like taking guns away from people who were part of like domestic violence case or something like that. And Trump was like, yeah, what? Otherwise, what? The cops are going to sit there and wait for 6 months, wait for a court to decide or something. It was a crazy set of statements. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? And I'd never heard these before. Fuck. And it sounds like chat hasn't either because you guys don't have.
Pam Bondi, Attorney General of Florida, and Mayor, thank you. I know you're going through a lot now. President, she was there that night with me. I think you were there with me until 3:30 in the morning when all these families were being notified, and it was horrific. So I know you've been through a lot, so thank you so much.
It might have been in this.
Great job.
I have a couple issues that I'll wait, and do I want to talk about them now?
Talk
or
about them.
later?
You could talk.
Oh, wait.
Well, one, it addresses some of the...
I think it was
Very talented people around this table.
this was in 2018. Bro, if Kamala or Hillary would have said this, these statements are insane. I can't believe I'd never seen this video before. I just saw it for the first time like a month ago.
To just introduce themselves quickly and say a few words, and maybe we can start off with Pam Bondi.
Thanks, President. I'm Pam Bondi, Attorney General of Florida, and Mayor, thank you. I know you're going through a lot now. President, she was there that night with me. I think you were there with me until 3:30 in the morning when all these families were being notified, and it was horrific. So I know you've been through a lot, so thank you so much.
Great job.
I have a couple issues that I'll wait and do I want to talk about them now?
Talk
or
about them.
later?
You can talk.
Well, one, it addresses some of the things you said in Florida. It's called the Baker Act, but it's our Civil Commitment Act, and it's weak, and it's about 1,000 pages long, and I've had my Solicitor General on it for 3 days now, working on it. We're rewriting it along with Governor Scott, who's you're going to meet with him. He's going to give you a ton of good information. We've been rewriting it, and we are going to bring in something called the Gun Violence Restraining Order. So if someone is civilly committed, and typically you can hold them for up to 72 hours, but people are getting out within 24 hours, the majority of them. So what we want to do is let law enforcement come in and take the guns.
Good.
They're a danger to themselves
Which you can't
or
do
others.
right now.
Well, because without being adjudicated. So because they're a danger to themselves.
You want them to take the guns and
when they are
not go through 6 months of legal trials and everything
Exactly.
else.
But we also have to give the mentally ill the due process in which they deserve, President. So what we're doing is they're going to be able to take the guns when they're taken into custody or into the hospital, and then when they're released within 24 hours or 72 hours later, typically it's 24 hours, but law enforcement will have 72 hours to determine whether they should give those guns back or they can go to a judge and say, Your Honor, please keep these guns. We feel this person is still a danger to himself or others, whether
So
they're
this
in or
would
out
not
of
have worked the
custody.
way it's currently constituted. This would not have worked with Cruz as it's currently constituted.
As it's currently written.
So you're going to make changes?
We're going to make changes. And one other thing we're doing about the reporting, President, which is huge, this is a big issue. We need a clearinghouse, and that's what we've all been discussing. And we have created, and several of my counterparts have done it around the country, but we're the biggest state doing it. It's an app, because kids now are on social media. And there were so many warning signs on Snapchat, on Twitter, on Instagram, and they were posting them, they were sending them to all different sources. We're going to have, and we just got it written in our House and Senate budget, it'll cost at least $500,000 a year to fund this. But what it does, kids, and so I met with 10 students, and they loved it. And they said, I'm empowering them. 3 of them are my graphic designers. They're going to design the icon. Some are going to name it. They're helping us with it. But it'll cost probably about $100,000 maximum to develop. That's all in our budget. So what kids can do now, they can automatically send something that says, I'm going to buy a gun, just like Cruz was doing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And one of the girls who I met with, one of the students, told me he'd been doing this since middle school. He'd bullied her, and she reported it. So it will all, they can instantly, and they can do it with anonymity. Put it in this app.
Good.
It'll go in the app, and it'll go to one clearinghouse with state law enforcement in Florida.
Well, you mentioned the internet. We have to look at the internet because a lot of bad things are happening to young kids and young minds, and their minds are being formed. And we have to do something about maybe what they're seeing and how they're seeing it, and also video games. I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts. And then you go the further step, and that's the movies. You see these movies, they're so violent, and yet a kid is able to see the movie if sex isn't involved, but killing is involved. And maybe they have to put a rating system for that. And you get into a whole very complicated, very big deal. But the fact is that you are having movies come out that are so violent with the killing and everything else that maybe that's another thing we're going to have to discuss. And a lot of people are saying it. You have these movies today where you can go and have a child see the movie, and yet it's so violent and so disgusting. So we may have to talk about that also. Well, thank you very much, Pam.
It's just like he even says like we have to go in and take the guns. That would be a 4-second clip of Hillary or Kamala. It would be played endlessly. Well, they already played because Kamala had a misspeak, a crucial misspeak where it was in relation to assault rifles or something. When you listen to what she was talking about was obvious and it was not really objectionable. But the thing that she had said, it made it sound like she wanted to like ban all assault rifles or something. The small clip that they'd taken. But like this has never been part of her platform. She never said it in any other place. Now conservatives explain this by saying, well, she let her master agenda slip, that she just wasn't gonna. So she didn't mean it, but it's like, why would you run on a secret agenda? Wouldn't you want Democrats who hate guns to vote? It was stupid, but yeah, it was funny that like, I think a few weeks ago somebody sent me this in totality, and I listened to it. So I'm like, wait, what the fuck? You go in and take the guns? Like, what the fuck? Whatever. So anyway, all that to say that yes, if Trump were to come out staunchly against the Second Amendment, there would be a good chunk of people that would make arguments for it and support him. Although maybe some people on the edges he would lose. There were some people that were mad, but remember, the bump stock ban happened under Donald Trump. That was a Donald Trump thing. And Donald Trump is a New Yorker. Donald Trump doesn't like guns. He doesn't shoot. He doesn't give a fuck about this shit.
Come to realize that none of this is actually true. neither faction really cares about any of the constitutions, the Bill of Rights, the laws. It is simply a moral worldview in battle with another moral worldview. A few examples being the liberal faction consistently trying to take away our right to keep and bear arms in various degrees, arguing that only militias can have them, that supporting assault weapons bans and calling for them more and more. That certainly violates the Second Amendment. Then you've got the First Amendment as it applies to we have a right to free speech. It's interpreted a bit beyond government passing a law with respect to an establishment of speech, because it actually restricts the government from using existing law to enforce against speech. But then you have, again, for the past 10 years, the liberal faction trying to use private equity and private resources to shut down the politics of their political opponents.
Did you call that out?
Private equity and private resources? That's not the government. You just said what it was about, to prevent Congress or the government through incorporation from preventing freedom of speech. What does that have to do with using private organizations to fight each other? Like, what?
I absolutely did. But see, that's my moral worldview. So when I say people have a right to express their political worldviews without fear of violence and harm.
Think about what you just heard. He said that somebody using a private equity, whatever the fuck that means, or a private business to try to shut down somebody's freedom of speech, he said that that's a First Amendment violation. But a lawful permanent resident having viewpoint distinguished reasons being given, like the fact that you support Hamas or support the Palestinians being used to deport you, that's not a First Amendment violation? Like, what?
Are we dealing with right now? There is no fucking reality where I am going to stand in defense of the moral worldview of the left that are firebombing Tesla dealerships in wanton.
That's the whole left? You get to generalize that to the entire left? You don't have to stand for that worldview, because guess what? It's illegal to firebomb Tesla dealerships. If they get caught, they get arrested. Like, we don't have to worry about that. That's not legal right now. That's still illegal. Nobody's trying to make that legal.
Of vehicles, and then they come to me and say, how could you not support Mahmoud Khalil? I'll be like, listen, the moral worldview you guys live in is might makes right, like the fucking Nazis. Okay, so
might makes right. This is from the guy who is defending the dude who's talking about invading fucking Greenland and invading the Panama fucking Canal and saying that Russia. You understand that our position on Russia-Ukraine is literally might makes right, right? Russia, it's realpolitik. It's realpolitik, my friend.
So you can make any argument you want to try to appeal to my view of the Constitution, and I'm going to say demons get no quarter.
So you're not going to stand on business because you hate
the left?
Yeah,
yes.
so I want to be clear. I condemn the Tesla bombers. That is fucking reprehensible. I don't agree with terrorism in this country. I'll call it terrorism. And I'll say, yes, that is terrorism. I condemn it. I think it's horrible. Yep. That's me calling out the left. Why would you say, I think
Don't worry, guys. Pisco, in his heart of hearts.
MAGA and what Trump has done to this country is a fucking disaster.
Is it unconstitutional to arrest a person's lawyers when they're facing criminal charges?
No. Why would it be unconstitutional?
So if a person is criminally charged, right? Let's say he's indicted, a mobster in New York.
Yeah.
He hires a lawyer. The lawyer starts drafting his legal defense, and then the AG of New York goes and arrests his lawyers.
Depends on what's
Depends on what you're arrested for. What do you mean? It's not illegal to arrest somebody. He's trying to tie this into some. Did this have to do with the Cohen case or something? Or
if the lawyer fucking shot someone, you would.
No. Rico.
Okay, so
let me finish the question. They go to the lawyer and say, "You're working with the fucking mobster. We're giving you 2 counts of RICO on top."
Oh no, sorry. So there you have a question of interpretation of RICO. Can RICO apply to legal advice? Okay, in that case, I'm going to have an issue with criminalizing conduct that amounts to legal advice, genuine legal advice.
Like when they arrested Trump's lawyers.
Sorry. I just want to be clear. There can be, in the course of pretending to give legal advice, if you are in a conspiracy to do some other crime, you would agree with this, right? If a lawyer says, "I'm giving you legal advice because I actually want you to do this crime," that's not protected, correct?
I don't know.
So you answer that question.
Hold on, I asked you a question.
Yeah. So
who is he talking to? This is the 180 rule. When you have cameras set up in such a way that the shot is changing, but you're not respecting the same viewpoint, it's hard to tell. Is Pisco talking to good logic here, or is he? Oh, I guess I've been on this step before, so I know. I think Pisco's on the far side of the table, and they're both over there.
Want you to do this crime? That's not protected, correct?
I don't know.
I can't tell. I think he's talking to good logic there. Good logic, I don't know why good logic doesn't instantaneously say, correct, that's not protected. One of the few times you can pierce the attorney-client privilege, because generally attorney-client conversations are privileged conversations, meaning that you can't bring them up in the court of law, you can't indict somebody based on something said to the lawyer, because the lawyer is just supposed to be an extension of yourself. However, if your lawyer is giving you advice on how to commit a crime, then there's an exception there called the crime fraud exception, which means now those statements can be brought in a court of law, and they can be used to indict you or your lawyer, right? They can be used as evidence against you. So of course that's true, but obviously that's true. Otherwise everybody just go to a lawyer for crime advice, right? Which you're not allowed to do that, you know?
You answer that question.
Hold on, I asked you a question.
Yeah, so I said no.
Okay, so when Jenna Ellis got arrested on 2 RICO counts.
She's part of a conspiracy to steal the election in 2020.
You see, that's the point. You decided to interpret legal advice as a crime.
No, because they're...
You can't give people legal advice on how to commit crimes. You're not allowed to do that. For obvious reasons, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. But now we're going to play the game. And Tim, I guess, is allowed to because he's not a lawyer and has no formal legal education and doesn't have informal legal education or whatever. But I played this with that Harvey Silvergate guy when I spoke with him, I think he's Eastman's lawyer. You can't say novel legal advice and just say that that's the reason why you're giving somebody guidance on how to commit crimes. Otherwise, you could literally just do, are you saying that criminal conspiracies are legal now as long as the person's a lawyer first? Like in that case, every single mobster would just make sure that all of their associates are lawyers. Like, oh, you can't indict any of us. We're all lawyers. See, we're just giving each other legal advice. Like, we're good. It's a giant fucking lawyer orgy fuck fest up in here. And nobody can be indicted for any conspiracy crimes because we're all just lawyers. We're just giving each other advice.
Second. So you're taking the view that nothing with respect
a lawyer
to lawyers.
who drafts a letter for a client should be criminally charged for it.
What if that?
Yes, if that letter is giving you advice on how to commit a crime. Correct, obviously. And in your world, lawyers should be able to give any piece of advice they want, and they're never criminally liable for it, even if they're literally telling you how to commit a crime. What if a lawyer wrote you a letter saying, this is the best way to murder your wife and get away with it? Do you think that type of behavior would be protected under attorney-client privilege?
Letter says with respect to hiring a mobster to hit someone.
Yes.
Did you say that?
Oh, nice. Thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Correct.
The lawyer
Hiring,
participates.
I'm going to ask the question again. If the lawyer drafts a letter to a mobster to get someone assassinated, would that be protected because it's the lawyer who drafted it?
Just for clarification.
Yes or no?
I need to clarify what you mean. You're saying the letter would instruct or attempt to bring a person in.
Or give advice on how to commit the crime. Here's how you can kill somebody and not get caught. It doesn't have to be telling them to. It may give you advice on how to commit the crime as well. This is why generally, if you're talking to even like a CPA or somebody, and you're like, if I wanted to do like tax fraud or something, or if they might say something like, I'm not going to tell you that you can do this, or I can't give you advice on this, but there might be like a blah, blah, blah. And they'll like, usually their hands off there because they'll never give you formal advice on how to do it because they can be liable for that.
Into either both. Let's do the two examples. You can answer both. One is it gives advice for how to get away with hiring a mobster, or it says these are instructions for hiring this particular mobster. Wait, I'm going to get an answer to this question. Wait,
here's why you don't deserve it.
No, I'm going to get an answer. I'll get it.
Oh my God.
I don't want to speak for you. I'm just telling you, this is the disingenuousness with which you're addressing this. Because when we're talking about Mahmoud Khalil, you talk about things that he likely has done, and you say we can't bring those facts up because
he's such a hack fuck. I hate him. We talk about things he likely has done. According to who? Put it in the record then, right? Put it in the record somewhere. Indict him with a crime. Go to some immigration judge. Do arbitrate. Like, you can't say likely according to what? Fucking videos on YouTube? There's no record. There's not a legal record of any of this because there's no due process. Well, sorry. The Venezuelan case is really heavy in my mind. I don't know what Mahmoud Khalil is going through right now in terms of his due process, so he might have due process stuff. But in that case, put that in that record. Charge him with a crime somewhere. Put him in front of an immigration judge and present him with a crime, with an arraignment.
Because he's not charged by the government. So we have to pretend that those facts have not happened and say that.
Correct. You can't consider facts that haven't been presented during a proceeding or are things being considered. Yes, that's how that works.
And even if he's engaged in those, well, that doesn't count because after all, he's not charged with them. He's not charged with them. We have to pretend that these things never happened. And that's when we're talking about addressing wrongs committed by someone who's associated with the left. When you're talking about Jenna Ellis, you're saying, when you're trying to theorize how her legal advice could somehow morph into being something that's illegal and would deserve for her to be charged as a conspirator or a RICO charge, you actually have to invent some crazy thing. Not that anything.
You're not following the conversation.
I am following the conversation perfectly. What I'm saying is it's disingenuous. The disingenuousness comes from the fact that when it comes to analyzing the left, you refuse to deal with facts that exist as they are and says because that's not charged, we can't talk about. When it comes to analyzing the right, however, you think it's totally fair to try and impugn their behavior, their conduct, and saying, well, it could be if they would have done this and start inventing brand new hypotheticals as a way of trying.
Pisco is using a hypothetical here because the entire case is hypothetical. Mahmoud Khalil is not a hypothetical case. That's a real case.
To now attach some possible culpability to the actions that they took.
Tim is attacking my consistency. In essence, he's saying these rights are ephemeral. These rights are kind of contingent.
Your view of them are. I think you've concluded that.
Well, if I were to cite Supreme Court precedent, would you say they're ephemeral?
Which Supreme Court precedent?
Here we have the case of Bridges versus Wexton that says that resident aliens.
That's bullshit that like Tim even gets to ask Pisco that question because like imagine if Pisco didn't have an answer here, right? Now we've already got that 48 case of the Wixton or whatever. But like it's not like Tim Pool knows any of these fucking cases, right? So like, but whatever.
Aliens have First Amendment rights.
Sure do. How does that apply to the INA?
Well, even as against the INA, that was a case. Now it's a pre-INA case, but if it would be no different.
So it's superseded. We need the Supreme Court to rule on this as to how it applies because it came after the fact.
These particular facts and circumstances, there's no on-point case that specifically defines this case, and any lawyer worth their salt can find some way to distinguish a case and say this is on Wednesday, not Tuesday. But I want to. He's attacking me, saying I'm dodging things or I'm okay with one hypothetical, not the other. That is completely not true. So Tim is.
Jenna Ellis committed a crime.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What did she do?
Yeah, so she conspired to get these false slates of electors, and by being part of a conspiracy, criminal conspiracy.
What did she do?
Do you know what a conspiracy is?
Oh my God.
What did she do?
A conspiracy. You know what a conspiracy?
For a conspiracy, you don't have to do anything with the web. No, that's not true. For a conspiracy, all you need is the plan and one step taken towards the towards the execution of that plan. However, the Georgia case, I believe, is a RICO case, so that gets a lot weirder. I haven't read RICO cases. My understanding of RICO for racketeering is basically a criminal entity exists and then that criminal entity is aimed towards some criminal thing, or an entity exists that's aimed towards some criminal action. And as long as you've helped the entity, then you're considered part of the thing that you'll be charged under RICO, I believe. So RICO, I believe, is distinguished from a criminal conspiracy charge, and that I believe you can do actions. I don't know what the mens rea is for like RICO related stuff. Like, I don't know how aware you have to be, or like what the underlying elements are. I can't speak at all. I shouldn't. I have no idea. I don't know for RICO.
What did she do?
Do you know what a conspiracy is?
What did she do?
So there was a criminal meeting of the minds, an agreement. Okay, so do you agree that conspiracy is a thing?
I can answer the question.
Yeah, so I said...
Because I think for Jenna Ellis, isn't that just part of the Georgia RICO thing? Because I don't know if conspiracy would apply here, but Pisco would know better than me, so... It is Georgia, okay. Yeah, and it is the racketeering thing.
Criminal conspiracy, was that an answer?
What did Jenna Ellis do? You are deflecting.
No. So I said criminal conspiracy. Is that an answer?
What did she do?
So she had an agreement with Donald Trump and other co-conspirators to steal the 2020 election in Georgia. In the case of Georgia.
What did she do?
She had a criminal conspiracy.
That's circular. You're saying
It's not.
Hold on. You're saying she was charged with conspiracy because she had a conspiracy.
No.
I'm asking what action?
Charged with conspiracy because she had a conspiracy is not circular. It's a causal. Now you're saying, why did she engage in a conspiracy? She engaged in a conspiracy because she was planning on helping another person commit a crime. And when you take plans to do a crime and then you take steps towards the completion of the crime, you're now guilty of conspiracy, even if you hadn't done the crime itself. If I go to the store and I buy a baseball bat, I haven't committed a crime. And if I tell my friend, we should fucking murder, we should go beat up Josiah with a bat, I haven't committed a crime. But if I have a conversation with a friend and I say, let's go buy a bat and beat the shit out of Pisco, okay, because fuck him, and then we go to the store and then we buy the bat, if you have evidence of the conversation and then you've seen that we've done, that we've taken the first step towards that crime, then that's a conspiracy. Can you do conspiracy to commit an assault? I feel like there's probably different conspiracy. Like, only some crimes qualify for conspiracy. We'll say we were going to kill him or whatever, right? Because I don't know if can you do like conspiracy to like a misdemeanor crime? I have no idea. Probably not. Or maybe you can, but I don't know. But yeah, conspiracy is just you have the plan, the meeting of the minds, and then you've taken one step towards the completion of that plan.
And she took that violated the law.
Yeah, so the action of the overt acts of communicating with other members of the conspiracy, helping them, giving them resources.
That's not what she was charged with.
No, she was charged with conduct related to the attempted theft of the election. And I don't, as I sit here, I don't know the.
It was for drafting a letter.
Facts. Yeah. So
requesting like legal documents from the state.
Requesting documents.
Said was in furtherance of conspiracy.
Requesting documents to get fake slates of electors and to try to steal the election.
You see, again.
Yes or no?
This is where the debate usually stops.
Why?
In the 1960 election.
Because you leftists. Oh, God, please tell me Pisco knows this. Oh, he's going to bring up the Hawaii election. It's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. That was done with the approval of the state legislature. Everybody in the country knew that this was going on. Nothing about this was illegal. And they said that he's going to bring up the Hawaii shit. Sorry, real quick. The Hawaii election was incredibly close, okay? It was so close. It was within like 130 fucking votes or something, 160 votes. And what Hawaii said is we're going to do a recount. However, our recount's not going to be done in time to transmit our votes to be in compliance with the Electoral Count Act. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to send you 2 slates of electors, and then based on the outcome of a recount, you guys will authorize one set or the other, okay? The state legislature okayed that. Everybody knew about that, and it was okay. This is not the same as Donald Trump, the Republicans, procuring 7 false slates of electors under fucking, under cover of night and crazy weird ways that they try to do this, and then to send them in just to get Pence to throw them out, to throw out the real electors in favor of their fake slates. It's not even remotely the same thing. Sorry. Pisco knows this. He knows this. He knows this. I know he knows this. He knows this.
I've had this debate 800 million times. JFK, Nixon, the uncertified slate was sent for JFK, even though the election had already been called. They did not resolve the case until after the safe harbor provisions, but they decided we're going to send an uncertified slate anyway, and it was never considered fake. Now, if there was Supreme Court precedent set after the fact that uncertified slates of electors, meaning electors that were not duly elected but were submitted anyway, if they set precedent saying you cannot do this, and Congress passed a law saying this is expressly illegal, I'd agree with you, but they didn't. So the legal theory that emerges in the 2020 case, though I disagree, I think Trump lost, I disagree with the people who think Trump won, was they've done this in the past. Why don't we have our electors submit before the safe harbor provisions, just like they did in Hawaii? Then Pence can choose to count or otherwise, based upon what the judges rule. Now,
because that's not what they did, and that's not what the plan was. The plan was to falsely assert that there had been election inconsistencies, or to falsely assert that they had evidence of voter fraud. None of this was based on any true, actual disagreement. Also, their claims for what they wanted Pence to do had to do with allegations of crimes and election rigging, not a legitimate recount that had been triggered in Hawaii, but...
If Donald Trump takes issue with an election, or anybody, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, whoever,
Pisco knows
and they
this.
say,
He knows this. He knows
one,
this.
we are required legally to submit any formal paperwork before the safe harbor deadline. Afterwards, we cannot. I don't see how that's a criminal action. More importantly, if Trump goes...
Because no one has been charged with it before? You think it's not criminal?
Because there's no codified law saying it's illegal. The government...
There are laws against...
You don't have to have a law saying like there are going to be some like catch-alls, like especially when it comes to doing conspiracies, right? So there's not a law that says that I can't like buy a baseball bat, right? There's not a law that says there's a whole bunch of shit in a conspiracy charge that isn't necessarily individually on its own an illegal action, right?
RICO does not apply.
Wait. So
my point.
Wait, so I just want to clarify. So RICO can't apply in any novel situation. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, but you are making my point for me. That you've decided to interpret legal advice as a crime to use power against a political
So I asked, can legal advice be a crime? And you objected and you said he doesn't need to answer it. So I asked you a question. Can legal advice itself be a crime?
Yes.
I'm not a lawyer. In some circumstances.
Oh my God! If you wouldn't even answer the hypothetical, then why even have the conversation?
The answer you don't know.
Can legal advice be a crime? Let's broaden that.
So, why don't you answer
No,
it?
just answer that question. Can legal, like, this is an obvious yes. Remember, okay, I don't know if do we have a funny name for this type of meme or whatever, for whatever Timple's doing right now? If somebody refuses to engage with a hypothetical ever, or they're constantly trying to requalify, it's because they know that they are intellectually bankrupt in their position. They know that they're being silly and goofy. If they're completely unwilling to ever answer a hypothetical, they know it's because they're being a little goofer, okay? They're being a little goofer.